Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on which time you are watching this. My name is Miss Bramley and I'm an English teacher here at Our Lady's RC High School. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a bit of a taster lesson as to what it's like to be in an English classroom here at Our Lady's. So having spoken to your teachers and other primary schools, we've had a look and thought that today it might be good to do a little bit of creative writing. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to explain to you what is to be expected in Year 7, the kind of things that we do, and how that's going to link in with today's lesson, because we want to give you a bit of a taster as to what you'll be doing in Year 7. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to see the PowerPoint, and I'm just going to go through it bit by bit. First of all, welcome. In Year 7 at Our Lady's, you're going to study so many different texts. You're going to look at different books, different authors, different poets, different kinds of writing like speeches and letters, which I know you already do at primary school. So the jump from Year 5 to Year 6 to Year 7 shouldn't be too much of a big one. Now, I know you all worry about coming to high school because it's a completely different place, different people for a lot of you, but the lessons are catered to be not the same as primary school, but we know the kind of thing that you have been doing, so it shouldn't be too much of a big step, hopefully. Okay, so poetry is an aspect where when Year 7 come into my classroom and I say, oh, today we're going to do poetry, I get greeted with a lot of, poetry, we hate it, we don't like it. And I know that that's not necessarily the case, because when I've spoken to your primary school teachers, a lot of you really enjoyed poetry in primary school. So maybe it's because they're different poets, or maybe they're different kind of poems that you're going to be reading. But hopefully, after today, because I'm going to mix a bit of poetry and a bit of creative writing together, you shouldn't be so either afraid of it or dislike it as much. Okay, so it's also an element of poetry is also an element that you will be studying in Year 11. So it is really important that we iron out those misconceptions, so those misunderstandings of what poetry actually is. Now, like I said, when people come in Year 7, they don't like poetry, they don't want to do it, but by Year 11, it's one of the components of the exam that most of our pupils do the best in. Okay, poetry is something that they excel in. Not necessarily that it's their favourite thing, because there are lots of really exciting things that we do in English, but that it's one of them that we do the best in. Now, creative writing, which we're going to focus on quite a lot today, is the element of English that a lot of you really enjoy when you come into high school. And that's something which we really enjoy when we do our first lesson and we say, what do you enjoy about English? For a lot of people, they say creative writing, I love writing stories. And that's really encouraging to see. And I've seen some amazing work from your primary school teachers of work that you've done, your stories, and they're amazing, they're colourful, they're long, and the actual content is excellent. Okay, so I've seen what you can do in primary school. So hopefully when you come to high school, you will carry on with that same high level of creative writing. Now, we in the English department, okay, we've seen this and we love seeing how well our future pupils are doing, and we're already excited to meet you all. So today, like I said, we're going to merge poetry with creative writing. And one of the things that we do in Year 7 is we look at how language has changed over time, because English today hasn't always been written or spoken in the same way. For example, in the year 700 compared to now, language has changed so much. Now on the next slide, I'm going to give you 2 examples of writing English language, and I want you to identify which one is from the year 700 and which one is from the year 2008. So have a look at those. Straight away, you should already be able to notice. Okay, I think if I was to read out the first one, so the one on the left, Gesia he enresid rinka menij, it's hard, okay, it's really hard. But then if I'm to read the first line of the one on the right, I'd prop myself up on one elbow. It's much easier for me to read. Why? Because that was language between the 700 and year 1000, and this is from 2008. And now you're probably looking at the one on the left saying, that's not even English. Well, actually it was, but language has just changed so much over time because of people moving different countries, because of the amount of invasions and wars that have gone on, so like the Anglo-Saxons and things like that. So our language changes depending on the people who live in the country and things that we pick up on our travels. So for example, people who live in London, if they come to the north, they might think, what's a chip butty? Okay, but us in the north, we know what it is. When we go down south, if we go to a chip shop and we say, can I have a chip butty? They'll be looking at us thinking, what are you talking about? Okay, so we have different understanding of language in our own country right now. So picking them up from different places is what's helped shape our language today. And also authors like Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, they have paved the way for the English language as it is right now. So in this unit of work that you do in Year 7, where we look at how language has changed, we also look at something called ballads. Now, some of you might think, I've heard of a ballad, thinking of a song, but actually a ballad is a form of poetry. Now, one of the ballads that we study in Year 7 is called The Lady of Shalom, and it's a poem which was written by Lord Alfred Tennyson between 1833 and 1842. Now, Lord Alfred Tennyson, when you come to doing GCSE, you'll hear a bit more of because we study one of his poems there. So, looking at the 1800s, it was a long time ago, as you can tell by these pictures, okay? We have a picture in the middle here of the Queen, which is Queen Victoria, and she is the second longest reigning monarch in the history of the monarchy in England. And Queen Victoria was a queen who made lots of decisions over her 60-odd years in reigning the country. And she's one of the most prolific, so one of the main kings or queens that we really remember. The only other monarch that has reigned longer than her is our current Queen Elizabeth II. Now, this man here on the left was King George III. Now, King George III was considered to be the Mad King. Now, he was king before Victoria, not right before. I think there were two other kings after him. And people believe that he actually went mad. And he later died, possibly as a result of, or maybe not as a result of, going a bit crazy. Now, there are a lot of reasons why he may have gone crazy, why he may have gone a bit mad, and I'm sure you can do a lot of research into that yourself, or maybe even in history. We also have here, as you can see, some slaves. Now, in the 1800s, the abolition of slavery came about in the British Empire, so there were no longer allowed to be any slaves amongst the countries that were ruled by the British Empire. We've also got here trains. So in the 1800s, traveling by train through England was invented. Okay, there was locomotives and other kind of transport like trains starting just before the 1800s, but the 1800s is where it really took off. Here at the bottom with these colourful dresses and this man's attire, that's how people used to dress. Now, it's very, very different to today, okay? So you can see how times changed in terms of fashion. And then just down here, we've got Oliver Twist. Now, I'm sure some of you will have heard of Oliver Twist, but it's a book written by Charles Dickens, and that was written in the 1800s as well. So, although the poem was written by Lord Alfred Tennyson between the 1833 and 1842, it was actually set in the 15th and 16th century, which is the year 400 and the year 500. Now, the reason that there's a big difference between when it was written and when it was set. So, Lord Alfred Tennyson is writing a poem, but it's not about his life in the 1800s. It's about a time much, much earlier, a time where he wasn't even alive, but he's heard of through stories and from reading books and educating himself. Now, the poem is about a lady, and she was alive during the time of King Arthur. Now, some of you may have heard of the legend of King Arthur, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And she was locked in a tower, and she was unable to look out of the window because she's cursed. All right. Now, you might be thinking, well, what is the curse? What would happen if she left? Well, we'll find out soon. But the only way she could look outside or see anything other than her room is through a mirror. So she could look in a mirror and then see the outside from that, but she could not look directly out of the window. So, as I said, we were going to have a quick look at the 5th and 6th century. As you can see here, this is the legend of King Arthur, and the idea that nobody could pull a sword out of the stone, only King Arthur was able to do it, which made him the king, and it's this idea of a bit of supernatural element. And there were lots of things like this, so games on horses, all for entertainment. I think it was called jousting, I could be wrong, but with the king and the queen sat watching it, and this is what they did for entertainment. Now, they didn't have a computer, they didn't have a television, they didn't have a phone in those days, and that's what they would do to keep themselves entertained, as well as the theatre and things like that. So the Lady of Shalom. Now, this poem is long, okay? It's written in 4 parts, and in total there are 180 lines. It's a really, really long poem, but that's what a ballad is. A ballad is a long form of writing, written verse. So when you think about songs and things like that, a ballad is usually like a love song. It's very slow, and there's obviously like different verses and different parts of it. And ballad in poetry is just quite a long poem. So we're going to look at the first part of the poem, and then we're going to do some creative writing. We're not going to look at all of it today. We're going to save that for when you arrive in year 7. So I'm going to read part 1 to you. Hopefully you will understand it and you'll be able to read along with me. I will go through it, so don't panic if you're struggling, okay? I will make sure that we stop and have a look over some language that might be a bit tricky, because remember, this was written in the 1800s. Language has changed since then. On either side the river lie long fields of barley and of rye, that clothe the wold and meet the sky, and through the field the road runs by, to many-towered Camelot. So I'm just going to quickly stop there. Barley and rye are crops. So in a farm and things like that, they were what helped make food and things, because they didn't have supermarkets like Tesco. A lot of people who own the land would make their own stuff. And it's just talking here about the place. So this is a place called Camelot. Now you might be able to see this image on the right-hand side with the castle and the one in the middle. That is Camelot. Okay, so it's just talking about the river and the fields and things like that. The yellow-leaved water lily, the green-sheathed daffodilly, tremble in the water chilly round about Shalott. So it's a bit of a play on words here, Tennyson has done. So water lily obviously is a real word. Daffodilly, maybe not. Chilly, yes. But as you can see, he's made it rhyme a little bit, like lie, rye, sky, by, lily, dilly, chilly. Okay, so it's describing the place around Camelot. Willows whiten, aspens shiver, the sunbeam showers break and quiver, in the stream that runneth ever, by the island in the river, flowing down to Camelot. Willows and aspens are types of tree. Okay, so it's just talking about how the seasons change and the willows whiten, the aspens shiver in the cold, and then there's a sunbeam coming down from the sky, showers break, so there's rain, quivers, so talking about the wind. So seasons go by, years and years go by, and obviously the nature changes because of the seasons, but Camelot still remains the same, and so does Shalott. 4 grey walls and 4 grey towers overlook a space of flowers, and the silent isle embowers the Lady of Shalott. Now this bit here, it gets a little bit more sinister. So we're learning here that the Isle of Shalott, so where the Lady of Shalott is, she's not actually in Camelot, she's just outside it, and she is imprisoned in 4 grey walls and 4 grey towers. Imagine constantly having to look at just 4 grey walls. You'd go crazy, wouldn't you? Overlooking a space of flowers. So down below the tower are lots of flowers, and the silent isle embowers. So this island near Camelot is completely deserted. She's on her own on this island. And that word embowers, we're going to have a look at that in a minute, but it does mean imprisons. And it's saying that this island has imprisoned her, so she can't leave this island. I think on your screen you can't see the rest, so I'm just going to read it to you, and I will explain it, so don't worry. Underneath the bearded barley, the reaper reaping late and early, Here's her ever chanting cheerily, like an angel singing clearly, over stream of Camelot. So this is here, it's just talking about how other people, they've never seen the Lady of Shalom, but she was singing, okay, and she was singing early in the morning, and the reapers are people who work in the fields and get the crops and things. You remember the barley and the rye? And they were talking about, they were describing how they could hear her singing cheerily, like an angel, okay, and that was the Lady of Shalom. Piling the sheaves in furrows airy, beneath the moon the reaper weary, listening whispers, 'tis the fairy Lady of Shalott. So again, it's just saying about how the reapers, they recognise her by voice. They've never actually seen her, but they recognise her singing, so they know she's there. The little isle is all enrailed, with a rose fence and overtrailed, with roses by the margin hailed, the shallop flitted silken sailed, skimming down to Camelot. So it's just talking about how this island, it's unkept, so the flowers have been left to just grow and grow and grow and haven't been cut down and made to look all neat and tidy because nobody's been there. And it makes us think, doesn't it? Well, if they can hear her, why is nobody helping her? Why is nobody saving her? A pearl garland winds her head, she leaneth on a velvet bed, full royally apparelled, the Lady of Shalott. So it's just describing now what she does, and she has nothing else to do, so she just leans on a bed and she's just really bored. And you would be, wouldn't you, if you were completely left alone? Now, this picture here is the Lady of Shalott in her room. Now, all she does is, like we were talking about, lies on a bed and just waits for the days to go by. But she also has a tapestry, which is like a material where you can sew on and things like that. And that's what she does all the time. And she sews the things that she sees in the mirror. That's Camelot. And then we've got this place here that the Lady of Shalott is staying. So I said that we were going to have a look at this word embowers. Now this is the bit that I really want to focus on. 4 grey walls and 4 grey towers overlook a space of flowers, and the silent isle embowers the Lady of Shalott. So she's imprisoned, okay? She doesn't want to be there, but she can't escape. So it makes us think, well, why can't she escape? And what would happen if she did escape? Now, we're not going to read the next 3 parts, but I'm going to tell you what happens. By the end of the poem, the Lady of Shalott sees the reflection of a knight in her mirror, and she notices this knight, and he looks handsome, and he's on his horse, and she thinks, oh my goodness. And so she turns around and she looks out of the window. Now, if you remember, she's not allowed to do that, but she does. And she leaves the tower and gets on a boat to Camelot, so she leaves. Nobody stopped her. Okay, so we're thinking, all right, is she going to be all right? Is this a lie? Is this even a curse? But then by looking out of the window, the Lady of Shalott has activated the curse. And then she dies in the boat, okay? Her heart just stops. So we've got here the knight, this picture. We've then got her on the boat, and as you can see, the tapestry there. And then we've got her lying down in the boat because she's passed away. All right, it's quite sad, isn't it? But what I want to do today is I want to do some creative writing based on this poem. Now, the Lady of Shalott was cursed. She had to stay in the tower. So what I want you to do is I want you to think, who do you think cursed her? What do you think she, he, or it looks like? Okay, the thing that cursed her. And then I want you to draw this character based on what you think that they might look like. So I've got some images on here, just as an example. Okay, and I've got a little goblin down here. So that's just what I thought maybe this thing that cursed the Lady of Shalott might look like. Now, somebody who looks very pretty and very kind isn't going to do this to a person. Like, why would you want to keep somebody imprisoned? So I've made them look a bit haggard and a little bit mean and terrifying. Okay, but it's up to you what you do. So go through those 3 questions in your own time, all right, and try and really create something that hasn't been done before. And then from your drawing, what you're going to do, you're going to describe that character. So once you've drawn it and you've really thought about it, you're going to describe it using adjectives and similes to bring your character to life. Now, I know you all know what adjectives and similes are. Oops, sorry, the light's just gone off. So what I'll do is I'll give you a second just to have a look at that adjectives and similes slide there, just while I turn the light on. Apologies. Okay, so the adjectives there. An adjective is a word that describes a noun or a pronoun. Okay, so for example, Jane is a clever girl. The adjective in that sentence is clever because it describes Jane. Okay, Jane is the noun or the pronoun, so we know that clever is the adjective. And then similes. So similes compare two things using the words like or as. So as sweet as honey. Okay, so you might say, oh, she looks really kind and generous. She's as sweet as honey. Okay, so you're comparing the girl to being sweet and being like honey. Or racing like a frightened rabbit. You're comparing the boy who's running to a frightened rabbit. Okay, so I know you know how to do these things because I've seen it in your writing and I've seen that you are able to describe in so much detail and using beautiful adjectives and beautiful similes. If you want to use metaphors and personification, feel free to do so, okay? Try and push yourself and challenge yourself. So, another thing that I just want to talk about is the kind of language that we're using. So, sometimes people might write in a few simple adjectives in there, so the brown dog or the clever girl, like we just saw before. But try not to use those simple, boring adjectives. Use a thesaurus to improve your vocabulary. Now, if you're working from home, you can access the thesaurus online. So if you just go to Google and type in thesaurus, it gives you a thesaurus link where you can just type in any word and it'll give you different words for that word. Which is really helpful when you're doing creative writing. But I've given you some examples on the PowerPoint there. So for colours in the blue box, we've got all of these lovely colours that we rarely use to describe. So sometimes we might say the blue sky, but what about things like the sapphire sky or something like that? So there's lots of words in there. Now, if you don't know what they mean, that's okay. All right, don't use them unless you've looked them up on Google or a dictionary and know what they actually mean. Okay, or if you do already know what they mean, then feel free to use them. But don't use them unless you've looked them up and know what they actually mean. And then on the right-hand side, we've got words to create an interesting character. So that could be quite helpful for us because we're really going to focus on this interesting character. And again, if you don't know what the word means, you might need to look them up online or just don't use them. Use words that you do mean, okay? So this is our checklist. This is what I want you to have achieved by the end of this taster lesson. I want you to have described what your character's face looks like, describe what your character is wearing, used at least one simile, 5 adjectives, and written no more than 10 lines. Now, some of you are probably thinking, wow, 10 lines, that's so much. Or some of you are thinking, I need to write more than that. You don't, okay? We need to really focus on narrowing down and being very precise in what we write. Sometimes getting to the actual main idea quickly is more effective than dragging it out and out and out, okay? So that is our focus. Here's an example. So here's one that I've written, and I will show you how I've reached that checklist. Hidden beneath her long, black, drooping hood was the haggard woman's grey face. Wrinkles lined her cheeks and forehead like a map. Her nose bent and twisted in a long spiral, covered with pea-green warts. The witch's chin pointed sharply out from her face, and her 3 chestnut and lemon-coloured teeth stuck harshly up from her gum. Okay, so I've used the drawing that I did earlier to think about how might this thing look, and then I've described it. So I've put them into sentences and I've used really, really ambitious vocabulary. So the first bit on our checklist was to describe what my character's face looks like. And I've done that because I've talked about the face, the wrinkles, the cheek, the forehead, the nose, the chin, face, teeth, gums. Maybe I could have described their eyes, but you'll see why I didn't in a minute. The next thing, describe what my character is wearing. I talked about their hood. I don't need to talk about everything, so I don't need to go into detail with their shoes and things like that, okay? But I've described the hood because that's the main thing that I wanted to focus on. And then used at least one simile, how the wrinkles lined her cheeks and forehead like a map. So if you've seen maps, there's lots of road lines and things like that all over the place. So that shows their wrinkles. Used at least 5 adjectives. I've used much more than 5 adjectives, not all highlighted, I don't think. So yeah, I've achieved that. And written no more than 10 lines. That's why I didn't want to do the eyes, because I sometimes you need to decide what's best to write and what should you miss out. So I decided I was going to miss out the eyes because I'd already written 8 lines. Okay, so here's your task. The first thing is you need to go quite a few slides back, unless you stopped the lesson, and I want you to write a description of the character who placed the curse on the Lady of Shalom. That's your first thing, okay? And there's your checklist for it. Now, I've given you an example, so feel free to go back and have a look at it, take inspiration, but don't copy it. Try and do your own thing, because I know that you can create your own characters, okay? So make sure you go back and do those 3 steps before you do this task, okay? And then complete this task. We, as an English department, would love to see your responses. So please feel free to pass them on to your teachers, and then your teachers pass them on to us, Our Ladies. We really, really would love to see them. We're very excited to meet you in the future, and we hope to see you all soon. So stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy. Bye.